Howdy folks, and welcome to a completely subjective ranking video from yours truly, Yami Noob. We are talking about the best looking motorcycles for 2026. Now, as many of you in the comments are very prone to tell me, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. There's been many bikes that I thought looked awesome, really enjoyed, and people in the comments sound off and tell me I am horribly wrong and that it's ugly and nobody should ever like it. But here's the thing, in ranking today's video, I gotta say, some of you guys might have a point. The more I look at these modern motorcycles, the more I kind of think that they are ugly. So how are we doing it for today's video? Well, I have 12 motorcycles from each manufacturer, which I think is their most beautiful bike. Then I'm gonna rank each of those until we find the most beautiful bike from all of the manufacturers. I picked all the major manufacturers, all the big hitters. I didn't do Indian or Harley because quite frankly, that's just simply not my lane. So let's start off with the ugly duckling for today's video. First on the list today is actually from Aprilia. Now, Aprilia makes some fantastic motorcycles, but I genuinely think they have kind of missed the mark a little bit with their styling and specifically their colors. It is the Aprilia RSV4. Now, I think the RSV4 is Aprilia's most successful design on their motorcycles, but it is the least attractive motorcycle for today's video. I think Aprilia's new zebra stripe multicolored thing is just simply doing a little too much. Combine that with the fact that this is an older platform that keeps getting revisions, and you really do get the sense that this is a bike that probably shouldn't have ended up looking this way because they keep tacking on different winglets, different design elements, different cutaways, and I just think it's not all that successful. You also get pretty limited color options with Aprilia nowadays. You only get 1 or 2 or maybe 3 colors in each of their bikes. And the RSV4, although it is their most successful looking motorcycle, you can only get it in the factory with the crazy white, red, and purple kind of paint job, or the base model with that blue. And I think the blue probably looks a little bit better, but honestly, neither one of them looks very good. It's loud, it's flashy, it's splashy, but in a way that just doesn't really appeal to me. Now in today's video, I'm also gonna tell you if I would plunk down my hard-earned money and actually go and buy one of these bikes. And the RSV4 probably for me is gonna be a pass. I think it's a really amazing motorcycle, it makes a ton of power for its category, but if I was gonna get an Aprilia, you guys know I probably would do a 2.0. I think the 2.0 is just so fun to ride, so nice to use, and if you're gonna get one that looks kind of funky, I'd rather have one that's at least a little comfortable. The next manufacturer on our list that finds its way in number 11 is Suzuki. Honestly, Suzuki's not making very many good looking motorcycles. Their adventure offerings look a little funky, the supermoto stuff is a little dated and weird looking, and Gixxers, well, they just kind of look like Gixxers. There's nothing wrong with that, but they keep putting weird new bold graphics on them, and I don't think it looks very good. And so, a sleeper hit for Suzuki is the SV650. I think it looks pretty good. A common theme you're gonna find in today's video is that certain models that are a little bit older but that have stayed true to their roots tend to perform a little bit better for the aesthetic ranking for today. And the SV650 with its round headlight, trellis frame, new kind of colorways, I think it's looking pretty sharp. Suzuki recently debuted a kind of green and bronze color combo for the SV, and honestly, it looks pretty good compared to a lot of middleweight naked bikes. It's further solidifying the proof in the meme that Suzukis will just endure because they're tried and true and classic, and say what you will, but people love them. I think you could do a whole lot worse, but honestly the SV in this green color looks pretty sweet. And although I wouldn't personally own an SV650 nowadays because I just like stuff with a little bit more power and a little bit more character, I think a kind of entry to intermediate level rider buying a green SV650, that's kind of a sweet bike. So it's a pass for me and low on today's ranking just because we do have some really heavy hitters of some beautiful motorcycles, but the SV, it's not too bad. Our next manufacturer is Yamaha, a brand that's known for making the crazy R-bike styling, the MT bikes, the XSRs, and honestly, when you really look at Yamaha's lineup, there's not that many bikes that you could genuinely say are beautiful or evocative or really capture the imagination like R bikes of old. So I think their most successful motorcycle is the Yamaha R7. You know, it doesn't have any winglets, it's a relatively clean and clear design. The R9 has those crazy like lunch tables on the front of it. The R1's grown the crazy mustache winglets as well. The MT bikes, well, they have a face only a mother could love, and the XSR line of bikes, although people think they look really cool, if you really look at an XSR, the headlight's a little too long, the tail section is kind of that weird like flat stumpy thing, and it's not the most successful modern retro bike, although having a ton of performance and being really nice to ride. The R7 was recently updated for the 2026 model year, and it now has some pretty cool splashy paint, and I do think it's the most successful of all the R bikes the Yamaha has. It looks purposeful, and for its size and capacity, it's pretty racy, and it looks like it can really do some damage, despite being a motorcycle that is appropriate for that kind of beginner plus intermediate rider. So would I own or go and buy one of these motorcycles? Well, it's just not really part of my MO, kind of like the SV650 right now. I'm looking for something with a little bit more power, a little bit more character, but I will say if I wanted to buy a kind of more turnkey track day toy that I can go race a little bit too, R7 is a good pickup, I gotta say. So you know what, I'll put a question mark right here. Maybe I get back into racing twins and then who knows. All right, this next one really pained me to put this manufacturer this low, but you gotta call a spade a spade. It is Triumph, and I do think their most successful design, it's not a speed triple, it's not a speed twin, not a street triple, I think it's the Rocket 3. I know, you guys are probably thinking I'm a little nuts for that one. Triumph historically is known as being a relatively conservative brand. Their styling and their color options and all the stuff that they do tends to err more on the side of sophisticated rather than splashy, loud, and crazy. You know, we saw that RSV4, it's kind of a zany color combination. Triumphs are always kind of that James Bond sophisticated vibe, even in their sportiest configurations. They always have more muted colors, more neutral colors, and the Rocket 3 kind of throws that all out the window. I don't know how Triumph can pull off selling a 2.5 liter cruiser with a 3-cylinder engine, but the way this engine is mounted, the big 3-cylinder sticking off the side, the length and girth overall of this motorcycle, I think just evokes power and presence and just a kind of crazy thing. We had one of these a while back as a loaner bike, and I'll tell you this, pulling into a parking lot with a Rocket 3 really tells you how it kind of captures people's attention and imagination. Even if you know very little about motorcycles, you can just see the engine in the middle of this thing, and it is absolutely gigantic. It looks crazy, it looks out of place, and it's zany, and I love that type of design. With a single-sided swing arm, a stumpy, purposeful tail, a big, wide, flat gas tank, and just something that says, you know what, I'm here to party. I think the Rocket 3 looks really cool, it's unique, but it's not necessarily classically beautiful in the sense of it being the best looking motorcycle. Now, if you're asking me, Yam, would you own one? Absolutely, no questions asked. I have considered owning one many times, and maybe someday it'll find its way into my stable. It's just so damn big. I don't know if I want to park it in my garage and have it take up the space of 3 motorcycles. All right, let's move on to our next pick. Now for our next motorcycle manufacturer, it's a brand that I think punches way above its price point and maybe is the best one in terms of bang for buck. And it may be proven out by a little story I got for you guys. It is Royal Enfield, and I think the best looking Royal Enfield right now, without a doubt, is their classic 650. I think it's just Royal Enfield operating at their best. They're picking some amazing colors, some amazing options. This looks like a real deal, old school Royal Enfield, and just has a ton of road presence and character about it. Now, the reason I know that Royal Enfields have a ton of road presence and character about it is because way back in 2021, when we finally got our hands on a Royal Enfield, we actually had a Continental GT, I believe. It was that variant of the bike in blue. And we parked it up in downtown Austin and asked people, how much do you think this bike costs? And I think the average we ended up with was like $16,000 to $18,000. Some people thought it cost 25 grand. So in terms of just sheer curb appeal for the price, Royal Enfield may be the #1 pick in today's video, and they've always done that. They've got cool color combinations, they got splashy stuff that's interesting, stuff that's sophisticated, and I think the classic 650 and the black chrome paint scheme looks killer. You know, call me a sucker, call me a Y2K boomer unk, whatever you want to say, but I do think a super shiny chrome motorcycle in the right way can look very cool. And at $74.99 MSRP, that's really not a lot of money for how cool this motorcycle looks. So if you want something that really stands out and you don't want to spend some of the money we're going to talk about later in this video, then this might be the best pick. So the question remains, Yam, would you get a Classic 650? Nah, I don't think so. It's not really my speed, not really my style. I think I need something that's a little bit more edged in this kind of sporting way. It's a little too laid back for my vibe. Now, next up is Honda. And Honda for many, many years was known as the conservative brand. Honda didn't make too many big splashy waves with their design in the last 10, 15 years, which is funny because historically, Honda was pretty out there with their design language. And Honda's current offerings are a little bit dad-coded, let's say, like the NT1100, the Africa Twin, the Gold Wing, their scooter products. I just feel like they're a little stale and safe, but there's one bike that really, I think, stands head and shoulders above, and the best one from them is the Fireblade SP. You know, a lot of new bikes, and yes, they are probably better performing for it, have these insane aerodynamic elements, wings, cutouts, vents, side pods. You know, I talk a lot about the Ducati products and how I think that they are incredibly successful in terms of their styling. But the Fireblade SP just has a classic Japanese superbike energy about it, and I think is, from the past 10, 15 years, probably one of the most successful big bike Japanese styled motorcycles that I can think of. The paint work, the fit and finish, the line cut out on the side of the bike that just draws your eye straight to the front wheel. That to me is what makes a really good looking sport bike, is when you have that angular silhouette that just leads down to the front wheel that looks like the bike is a kind of like a cat that's ready to pounce. The winglets are subtle, the paint job is cool, the semi-active Olin suspension, all the cool stuff that this motorcycle has just makes it look purposeful, racy, and awesome. So, would I get one? Well, I had one back in 2021 as a giveaway. It was a pretty nutso machine, and I thought that it would need quite a bit of tinkering on track to get it to a point that I was really enjoying riding it. I thought it was like a coked out R6, to be honest. So I'm gonna put a question mark on this one. I'm not gonna say no to a top shelf leader bike. I always have a ton of fun with those on track, but at the same time, it's a bike that is a bit hairy, a bit strange, even though it has this reputation of being like a relatively nice motorcycle to ride on track. One of the most humbling experiences in motorcycling is when you confidently leave your house on a beautiful spring day, only to be fighting for your life 25 minutes later in biblical rainfall because you were foolish enough to trust the basic weather app. Every rider's been there. You see blue skies and you think, yep, we're good, let's go for a ride. And the next thing you know, you're hydroplaning behind a lifted Dodge Ram while your visor fogs up like a bathroom mirror. You don't have a pin lock system? Weird. It turns out that you don't need to experience that anymore thanks to the Weather Pro app. This has become a crucial part of my pre-ride ritual. It uses real-time radar tracking so you can literally see storms moving toward you instead of getting just some vague little rain cloud icon. And here in Texas, it's been raining a ton lately, so I kind of want to know if I'm going to get rained on. It also sends severe weather alerts before things actually get bad, which is super helpful for planning longer rides. It's updating constantly so you can actually trust the information instead of gambling your entire afternoon on an outdated forecast, like some old timer who watches the morning weather report on TV. You can also set multiple locations so you can check conditions at home, work, or whatever your destination for the day is. Using Weather Pro means fewer ruined rides, fewer surprise storms, and fewer moments when your riding boots take 6 whole business days to dry out. Download the Weather Pro app now using the link in the description and enjoy better riding. Thanks to Weather Pro for the support. Now let's get back to the show. All right, next up, time to give them their flowers, because Kawasaki is coming in at number 6 on the ranking today. Now, if Kawasaki did not have this one specific motorcycle, they may have found themselves bottom of the list, because Kawasaki makes some heinously ugly stuff. Can we just be honest? The Sugomi styling, the kind of brutalist, grotesque nature of an H2, the ninja bikes that all kind of look like Kawasaki Kyle motorcycles, but there's one bike that it's the best executed version of this type of motorcycle. Of course, I am talking about the Kawasaki Z900 RS SE, specifically the SE configuration. Now, I've harped about the modern classic stuff before. I've said, oh, if they don't have analog gauges, if they don't have this, if they don't have that. You know, the XSR 900, I think it's doing a little too much with its styling. The Z900 RS, with the metallic paint job, with the orange on top, the gold fork, it just looks amazing. The gold wheels, the shelf seat, just the analog dials, this bike has everything going for it. In terms of a modern day UJM, I think it just about is perfect. And it's interesting because Honda would have actually made its way further up if they still had that old school CB1000R with the single-sided swing arm, but they don't make that bike anymore, so Kawasaki actually usurped them because I do think the Z900 RS is a better looking bike than anything else we've talked about so far. So, beautiful execution, great looking motorcycle, really nice. What's not to like? And that remains a question. Yam, would you get one? I honestly think I would. You know, in terms of owning an inline-4 motorcycle, they're really not my favorite engine configuration. I've never owned an inline-4 for personal reasons, only ever for giveaway bikes. But I actually did come close to the Z900 RS. It was actually in my finalist motorcycle list before I ended up with the Ducati Monster 1100S. I did consider a Z900 RS SE because I just thought it was really cool. And ultimately, that's where I'm coming from for today's ranking, is like, how much does this motorcycle evoke emotion in me? How much do I think it's like something like I just gotta have, and I think it looks really cool, and like, is it stirring something in my soul? Next up is KTM, and much like Kawasaki, if KTM did not have this one motorcycle, they probably would have fallen somewhere like 11th or 12th or low on the ranking, just like Kawi. You know, KTM's known for their Kiska design. That's the design firm that makes all the angular, kind of Northern European, Swedish looking stuff. It just looks all angular and crazy. They're orange. They're very polarizing. It's very much an acquired taste. But I think one bike is not an acquired taste and looks really damn good. It is the 990 RCR. You know, this is a bike that I think is the most successful new generation super sport. You know, like I said, the R9's got the really big, like, lunch tray on the front of it. The Panigale V2 actually, I mean, it looks cool, but it, you know, if you compare it to the old Panigale with the single-sided swing arm, the more purposeful shape, you can tell it's a bit of a road bike. The 990 RCR, despite having the bones of a road bike, looks super purposeful and really cool. I think in terms of having winglets, it's the most successful design because they actually look like MotoGP shaped winglets, not just stuff that was stuck to the side and makes it look like it's gonna take off into space. Although it does suffer a little bit from the kind of like stumpy tail rear end thing that a lot of these new bikes have because they're all based on naked bikes. Proper sport bikes have much longer tails. These new generation sport bikes have like really stumpy, weird little things. And then the middle of the bike is really big because the engines are all plus sized. But the 990 RCR, I think, really strikes a good balance, and it looks a lot like the RC8C, which I think is a super cool and purposeful design. You know, the orange, the ready to race, the whole ethos of the bike, it really comes together and gels together well. It was a bike that when it was first announced and launched, I kind of looked at it and thought, wow, that is a cool and evocative and interesting motorcycle. So would I own one? Maybe as a giveaway bike. I don't think I'm ready to commit to KTM as my track bike or my road bike or anything like that, so I'm gonna put a question mark on this one. I think it could be interesting, but maybe it wouldn't be a bike I would initially reach for. Fourth place is a newcomer, a new brand that's a bit of an old brand if you know your motorcycling history, and that would be Norton. And I'm not talking about the Manx R, I'm actually talking about the Atlas. Now this bike really threw me for a loop because when I saw the Manx R, I thought it was pretty interesting. I love that they're doing something different. They're not leaning on the whole like winglets, aerodynamic elements. It just looks the way a sport bike should probably look. But I gotta say, I think the Atlas is more successful even. Maybe it's because the kind of 5 to 650-ish cc kind of crossover sport touring thing is kind of a category that's hard to pull off in terms of styling. Most of the bikes in that category are woefully boring to look at. Your Versys 650s, your Honda 500s, you know, all these bikes you're like, okay, like they do the job, but they're not supposed to be exciting looking. But I think the Atlas looks really nice. Design language is a very important thing, and when you're revitalizing a new brand and trying to make waves and do something splashy, you know, it's easy to kind of fall victim to what the RSV4 is doing, just make some crazy splashy paint jobs or whatever. But the Norton is really pulling off this like more restrained, easygoing vibe of a sport touring style bike. You know, I've heard some people online kind of derisively saying it looks like, you know, AI or it looks Chinese, but honestly, I think Norton has a pretty successful and unique identity compared to a lot of other motorcycles I've seen, and the silver and the lack of aero elements and the more subdued styling is honestly a breath of fresh air to me in 2026, where everything feels overly stylized. Like I said, I prowled through all the major manufacturer websites and looked at all of their motorcycles. You start to really get a sense of how crazy over stylized most of these bikes are. And so for a return to basics, a simplistic kind of thing, I think it knocks it out of the park. So would I own one? Well, if they maybe made one with a 21-inch front end that could maybe replace my Touareg, maybe, you know, maybe I would. But for now, in this kind of cast wheel configuration, probably isn't a bike that I would get much utility out of. So I'm gonna go ahead and mark an X on it. Look, I know you guys probably think it's Ducatis all the way at the top, but it's not, and it's not even the Ducati you think it is. I have a twist for you today, I promise, don't worry. But in third place is BMW. Now, BMW's styling in a lot of their bikes are not to my personal taste. You guys know I don't love the Boxer motor. I don't really love the way the GS looks. I don't like what the GS does, and that's kind of BMW's big claim to fame is touring motorcycles and the GS, let's be honest. But in a kind of like sleeper hit sort of way, I think BMW's heritage products are really nice. And I know people wouldn't say that they're slept on, but they're really, really sweet. And I think the R12S is their most successful design, with the R12 GS coming a very close second. So we got this kind of purposeful orange shape, this sort of beautiful cafe styling to it. And the Boxer engine, although not my preferred engine layout, you got to admit it does look like a beautiful jewel hanging from the motorcycle's underside. I've sampled several BMW products over the years, and I have to say their attention to detail and the way that they go about their business is really impressive. It's built to a very high standard, and as such, it does command a pretty expensive price point at $22,000. You know, but the wire spoke wheels, not a lot of people are doing that nowadays. Triumph used to do that with the Thruxton, they don't do it anymore. You know, all these hallmarks of things we loved in the kind of beautiful classic motorcycle style have all been kind of taken away. And again, that's kind of the theme I've seen in this video is like, when you go back to the basics and you strip things down and create a purposeful shape, you get a really beautiful motorcycle. So would I own one? Well, you know, it has a Boxer engine, so I personally wouldn't get one, but I gotta say, I would take a long, hard look at it because it just is so darn pretty. Now, number two, we finally get to Ducati. As everyone knows, Ducati makes a lot of beautiful Italian motorcycles that many people put up as posters on their wall. But my hot take is that a lot of their new stuff is leaning more towards purposeful and less towards beautiful. And I think that the last generation Desert X, which is still for sale according to their website, is their most successful design. So many people on the channel know I'm a bit of a Ducatiste, kind of a purist when it comes to these things. I like older Ducatis, and I think that they had a very special allure and vibe about them. But a lot of the new stuff has kind of lost a little bit of that charm, I'm not gonna lie. I remember looking at the old Panigale V2 versus the new Panigale V2, and I understand the new V2 is a better motorcycle for more people, but that old V2, when you sit them side by side, you're like, there's no comparison. This bike is gorgeous in the way that it looks. And I've just noticed over time, Ducati has just done that where each generation of bike becomes better, but not quite as beautiful as it used to be. And hey, maybe chasing ultimate performance, you know, you gotta sacrifice a bit of beauty at a cost. So the Desert X comes into play here because the Desert X to me, when it was released, was such a unique and interesting design. The LED twin round headlights, the kind of 80s Dakar racer thing, I just found it so interesting and great to look at. And it was a bike that I considered so many times for purchase. And if Aprilia probably hadn't facilitated my Touareg 660, maybe I would have got a Desert X, but the price point is a little spicy even for my liking. I have to say though, the new version Desert X with the V2, oh my God, why did they make the eyes squinty and they changed the whole thing? And the whole point of those eyes was to keep them round. It's like, why did you make them squinty? It looks so silly now. It looks like the bike is doing this to you, you know? It just looks terrible. But for now, this one is still for sale, so it is a technicality for new motorcycle, but I think it's such a great looking bike. It just looks so cool, it looks so purposeful, and it's hard to make an adventure bike look nice. You know, it's really difficult to make an adventure bike look like something you'd actually want to own and not just have it be something where you're like, you know, kind of like we were talking about the Atlas and the 500cc bikes, where you're like, okay, like it looks that way, but it serves a purpose. So would I own a Desert X of the last generation? Absolutely. Really cool bike, would happily do one, would really enjoy my time with it. Very nice machine. So what could number one be? So as I mentioned at the top of the video, looks are subjective, and this is just my personal taste and what I think looks cool. And this manufacturer is very interesting. It's MV Agusta. Now, MV Agusta makes a lot of hyper stylized things that they call motorcycle art, bikes that are probably designed to be parked in some Saudi prince's apartment somewhere. But there's one model that I think is just so achingly good looking, and I just think is one of the greatest sport bike shapes of all time. It's the F3RR, baby. Now, the F3RR has been around for a long time, and as I said, a lot of these older designs have tended to age a little bit better than some of the new stuff because they're not as stylized. But they have a version of this one in Rosso Ago and Argento Ago. It's this like kind of white and red thing, and it is so drop dead gorgeous beautiful that I just want to buy one just to look at it. All the little details on MV Agustas are just fascinating. The triple exit exhaust, or you can swap in the race Acra system from the factory, the single-sided swing arm, just the lines of the bike, the purposeful shape, it's just perfect. It's the little details too on the F3 that I think are really cool, like the front fender is a black carbon fiber and the underbelly is black as well. I think that almost always looks best with motorcycles, especially sport bikes. You make the bottom darker and then you pull color towards the top. Being that it's an old school sport bike, it's got that purposeful tail, the trellis frame attached to the subframe. The front end looks a little like a Gixxer, but I just think it has all the right notes to it. The other side of the swing arm, of course, because it's single-sided, has that exposed hub and then it kind of warps its way back into the engine. They're just so pretty, and you could just sit and stare at one for hours on end. I just think these look amazing, and in terms of sport bikes, probably one of the greatest designs ever concocted, at least for the modern era. And again, they're selling these new, so I can put them in here, even though this design is, I think, at least 10 or 12 years old. So, would I own one? Absolutely. I got the chance to sample one of these in RC trim back in 2020, I think, and I thought the bike was fantastic. I thought it was great. It's the 3-cylinder sport bike of my dreams. It makes all the right sounds. It does all the right stuff. Looks amazing. It would be really, really hard to pass up one of these. And maybe if I've got a spare 25 grand lying around that I want to light on fire and I want to send my Daytona off into the good night, I will just pick up an F3RR and just slightly tweak a few things here and there and just make it that beautiful track day dad toy. And then I'll sort of complete my holy triumvirate of Italian ridiculous motorcycles in my stable. Maybe I'll go full Italian. I don't know. So what do you guys think of my ranking of the best looking motorcycles in 2026? Would you swap any of these around? Would you do anything different? Let me know down below if you agree with my picks, if you think anything else should be included. I always love to hear from you guys. Thanks so much for checking out today's episode. We appreciate it. We'll catch you in the next one. See you later.